Almost a year ago, in the early days of COVID-19, hand sanitizer was scarce. Shortages in the US, Australia, Europe, Asia, and in Indonesia especially, were ramping up amidst growing concerns of the as yet unnamed virus. Shelves were empty, stocks depleted, and even in Indonesia, it reached a point where the national police was forced to launch an official investigation into the dwindling supply of hand sanitizer. It was this shortage of hand sanitizer that initially led me to consider creating eco-friendly hand sanitizer from sustainable sources for those in need as a topic for my personal project. In my case, the issue struck me as personal because it was something that had the power to affect my loved ones directly, most especially my own grandmother, who suffers from late-stage lung cancer. For her, immunity is something fragile and easily lost, and something as small as a cold can cast long shadows. For her, hand sanitizer can be a matter of life and death. Thus, I began investigating ways of making hand sanitizer in the event of a shortage. The goal of my personal project is simple: to find a way to create viable, eco-friendly hand sanitizer from scratch without purchasing large amounts of alcohol from commercial sources in the event of a shortage, sourced from eco-friendly sources and capable of standing on its own next to more traditional hand sanitizers. To establish continuity and context to my investigation, I chose scientific and technical innovation as my global context, as I would essentially be utilizing existing methods of ethanol and alcohol fermentation in new, exciting ways, primarily to produce hand sanitizer. As a project, it's also challenging because it forces me to up my game in science in obvious ways, and also my own communication and social skills in researching through interviews.
The hand sanitizer, I think, is already very important long time back, before the pandemic.
Communicating with supervisors and convincing people to try out my sanitizer. There were many prior sources of learning that I took advantage of in this project, from small experiments in my old 8th grade STEM honors class, which frankly was a bit of a disaster but allowed me to develop and grow in terms of science and personality, to math competitions and science festivals. I utilized my skills and knowledge in STEM, science, engineering, mathematics, to my advantage. I was also inspired and informed by my own visits to a low-income local school in Jakarta a year ago, and my own experiences learning and debating about a world on the margins in the World Scholars Cup. I also learned quite a lot in the MYP, from lab reports and experiment work in science class, design reports, and even more experiments in design class, to marginalized communities and even some sociology in my humanities class. Throughout my investigation, I analyzed many different studies, from universities like the University of Islam in Jakarta, and even all the way in Nigeria, and other different sources. I also launched my own experiments into finding out how to create alcohol, in my case ethyl alcohol, from eco-friendly sources, and eventually found a method of converting cassava roots, abundant in my community and in the surrounding areas, into alcohol. I even ended up interviewing a doctor, a medical professional who owned a private skin clinic and produced her own brand of luxury hand sanitizer for her clients. That ended up being a great experience. It was a far cry from when I would simply scour any site that ended in .org or .gov or even .net if I was desperate for information. As it was, my research and my experiments especially paid off immensely and allowed me to plan properly for the next stage of my project. To plan for the actual work in my project, that is, making and distributing the hand sanitizer to those in need, I developed success criteria for my final product, which were basically a checklist for what I was aiming for, etc. To achieve all this, I created and kept a special timeline in Google Docs to keep track of my tasks and accomplishments. I also used Notion, an organization and planning app targeted for additional to-do lists and other organizational things. To efficiently plan production, I created a block-by-block production plan for producing my hand sanitizer. Unfortunately, I had to alter the production plan as I was forced to limit the amount of sanitizer I planned on producing from 50 liters to just 2 liters of hand sanitizer due to limitations with my supply of cassava, limitations from social distancing rules as I needed the supervision of an adult, my tutor Mr. All, to distill the alcohol due to fire risks, and limitations in terms of the time needed to produce the alcohol. Throughout this project, my successes and improvements in planning and organization allowed me to further develop my own self-management skills, which previously were quite lacking. My organizational skills improved through my dedication to planning in my Google Docs timeline, my block-by-block production plan, and my notes in my Notion app. I also demonstrated and improved my affective skills and reflective skills in the process journal I kept throughout this project. This process journal allowed me to reflect based on my ATL skills and improved my state of mind. All in all, I used many different media to plan and organize my personal project. Throughout my project, I engaged heavily in scientific and technical innovation, in fermenting alcohol from cassava roots, and creating my own hand sanitizer recipe. In ethanol fermentation, the biochemical conversion of cassava roots to alcohol, I innovated in 3 of the 4 stages of fermenting cassava roots into alcohol. When I mixed the alcohol recipe, I also innovated by altering the consistency, feel, and smell of the recipe through 3 trials. For my product, I also tested all 8 of my success criteria through production. I tested the success of my product's function, safety, target audience, eco-friendliness, and aesthetic and usability in Zoom interviews with Dr. Holly, who I consulted with to discuss medical things related to my project. I also tested this through user surveys to friends and family and people in my local area. Safety and comfort and usability probably had the most positive feedback from testers and participants, and it also got the green light from Dr. Holly. Through this project, I gained an understanding of communicating with supervisors or mentors like my PP supervisor, Mr. Zaidan, and my personal tutor, Mr. All, who guided me through the risks in distillation and fermentation, and interacting with Dr. Holly through Zoom interviews and the testers and survey people of my hand sanitizer. All in all, my project went well and fulfilled my success criteria, achieving my goal of producing hand sanitizer from eco-friendly sources for people in need in my local area, in the context of scientific and technical innovation.